All right, welcome everybody. My name is Daryl Bennett, come back swinging, and I have as a very special guest today, Dr. Oscar Odom, who is the former Deputy Commissioner for the NYPD, among a number of other things. I am very excited, one, to have him here. Number of things I want to talk to you about today. I have to, look, get me right. I'm going to do Dr. Odom and not Oscar so we can keep this formal, professional. So first of all, if you could just tell us a bit about your journey. I know you were a detective at first in the NYPD for many years, and then sort of like your ascension to the ranks of the leadership and where that's led you to today.
Okay. First of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, to have this dialogue with you, my brother, and to discuss whatever topics that you want to discuss and go into it. I like to always start by saying is my roots. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. The old phrase coined, do or die Bed-Stuy, born and raised in the Tompkins housing projects. That's where my journey began. And after that, I went away to school to play football. After that, I left. I went into the military. I was an officer in the United States Army. Then after that, I came back and went to the NYPD. Went in there to make a change, to have somebody from the inside who knew what it was like growing up in the hood, so to speak, and realizing certain things. And if you know anything, you're familiar with Brooklyn, the Tompkins housing projects. On one side, we had the Marcy housing projects. In the other block, we had the Sumner housing projects. NYPD, I worked as a patrol officer in the 7-3 precinct in Brownsville, the 7-5 in East New York, the 7-7 in Crown Heights, the 8-1 in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I taught in the police academy. I worked in the intelligence division. I worked in the career criminal investigation unit. I worked in the juvenile crime squad. I worked in the fugitive division. After that, I became a 4-star chief in the New York City Sheriff's Office. After that, I became the first deputy commissioner in the New York City Sheriff's Office. Also, I served as a commissioner on the New York City District and Commission. All of that, a young man from do or die Bed-Stuy, the Brooklyn Tompkins housing project. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm a college professor. I do various things. I give back in the community, and I continue to give back and speak out like I had on numerous issues, because I have a chance to speak from my position of my experience, my position of growing up in Brooklyn and still remain in Brooklyn, and to give a viewpoint from the lens in which I'm able to view it from both sides of the aisle, so to speak. In a nutshell.
You have a powerful story and a lot of things that certainly that you share with me that is opening up my eyes to some things. And well, let's just get into it. I mean, I want to ask you about a number of things before we even get into kind of what may be expected from me, because I had a few people that did reach out and send me questions because they didn't know who you were, but they knew that just right. Your rank and some of your credentials, they didn't know your name that you'd be on. But before I even get into sort of the law part of it, I just want to ask you from the perspective of someone who has spent so many years with your pulse, your finger on the pulse on the ground here in New York City, in law enforcement in so many different ways. We are seeing unprecedented economic depravity. Depravity might be a strong word. Let me not use that word for connotation reasons, but a lack of economic opportunities. Perhaps such as like anything we've seen since the Great Depression. How do you, because I think about, as I was preparing for this broadcast, I thought about something you said to me years ago when it was raining. Do you remember what you said? You said it's raining, so.
What did I say?
You said you said the first thing I think about when it's not raining when it's raining is low crime. And I remember thinking,
yes.
Always a career law enforcement. I mean, we weren't even talking about anything that had anything to do. It was raining cats and dogs, and you said, oh, well, crime is down today.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, because you know that there are just as simple as the weather changes the way people act in crime patterns, right? How has, on a macro level, do you believe the economic disruption or lack of opportunity, whatever you want to call it, how do you feel that is going to impact the city just New York City, even if you want to speak to the country, moving forward in the next year or so?
Well, one of the things is the saying is the law of survival is always greater than the law of thou shall not steal. You know, when people are trying to survive and you got to eat, you're going to do at certain times what you need to do to eat.
To eat.
You know, so therefore, I think that we need to have more programs, more economic programs to help those who can't at this given time take care of themselves or put food on the table. So at least people be able to put food on the table and also to be able to pay their rent, because survival, when the instincts kick in, that's going to be it. And the thing is, this is that it cuts across all race lines. It's not just, what the stereotype, what they may think, it cuts across lines. They may just do it in a different way, but it's still done. So therefore, unless there's some sort of hands as far as helping people to assist and extending these rent regulations and when you got to pay it, people are going to survive. And that's going to be the issue, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, whatever.
And when you say that, it made me think about, so I was, we've been pretty in tune on this end, and I want to share with you one of the initiatives that our office released, but we've been pretty in tune on some of the economic reports that are being released nationwide. And the reports are concerning at best. I believe, I don't remember the young lady's name, but whoever it is, that's the press secretary over at the White House now. They were doing a press conference and just explaining that, first of all, the population that was affected most in the workforce last year were women. They were the more than likely, that dropped out of the workforce. And then, of course, you have, minorities, Black and brown communities that were also hard. And then you have Black Lives Matter, all on top of this.
Yes.
And I kind of want to ask you about this because there are some that have seen the Black Lives Matter movement and the response to it as limiting police, almost as, no pun intended, but handcuffing them at a time when perhaps they need to be deployed the most because of everything that's happening. And then there are those on the other end, of course, that are saying defund, replace, what are your thoughts on all that?
The tough part about this, like I said, Black Lives Matter, there's no doubt that it's necessary to move forward, to push the agenda, to raise issues. And as I've stated many times, regardless of the TV channel that I was on, I said, one thing that Black Lives Matter and good cops have in common, they both hate bad cops. So that's where we're on the same page at. We both hate bad cops. The thing is, this is that it's needed, it's instrumental, but we have to look at what we're doing. The thing is, it's an oxymoron. I've spoken on numerous panels about defunding the police. The oxymoron is that people are upset with some of the practices with the police, and that's obvious. Like I said, you could see when I was on TV and Fox News at that, when they were talking about George Floyd, and my response was hands in the pocket, knee on the neck. Hands in the pocket, knee on the neck. There are no tactics that train you to put your knee on anybody's neck and your hands in their pocket at the same time. Not even one without the other. No knees on the neck. So those were bad practices that raised a lot of issues, and some that may have been hidden at certain times, and it came to the forefront. But the thing is, you can't take away from them, in the defunding process and say to do more. We have to analyze it, because what we have to realize is that the police work for us. So we have to drive the different issues that we have. And a lot of times, basically,
because I do want to explore that, Oscar. And it's not a leading question. I mean, I have my thoughts on it. Who's the us that the police work for?
Well, technically, they work for us. Like when they say, how people would say sometimes respond and say, my tax-paying dollars pay your salary or whatever like this. Yes. And until we understand that as a group, or sometimes as a group of people, then we will be able to show our power. And here's the thing is that police officers, this is what I say, because of course I was one before, retired. The thing is this, like I said, it's a noble profession. It's people who get the call and put their lives on the line, and they run towards danger. They hear the call, man with the gun. They don't run away. We run towards it and we go there because people call. We don't have a crystal ball or say something's happening here. We get the call and we go to it. But the issue is sometimes some of the policies, and when they had to stop, question, and frisk things, the police officers said, look, we were ordered to go out there to do stop, question, and frisk. So now if you have 40,000 police officers writing a minimum of 25 tickets, look how many encounters you're having with the public. 40,000 police officers with a minimum of 25 summonses per month. That's going to cause issues. That's going to cause problems, as opposed to having me coming to your birthday parties, to the celebration with the kids in the neighborhood, to their after school program. No, you got me writing summonses and I'm hurting you financially, and then some sort of altercation can take place. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And the different, so go ahead.
If I could say this, I keep saying, Dr. Odom, I think that you have very charitably and kindly described the scenario. I think, and I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm a bit biased here too, but I want to ask you, it seems that yes, so two things I want to kind of ask you about. One, it seems that, you're suggesting about bad cops, right? I mean,
right.
This is bigger than bad cops. I mean, I think we've ascertained that, right? When do we situate ourselves or pivot our attention from bad cops to a bad system, right? So, and that may not be I don't mean an overarching system, but when do we look at things as a system rather than in a couple people that did wrong things?
Well, I agree with you. See, and that's the thing. And that's what some of the cops argued in the stop, question, and frisk thing. They argue that the way the system is set up, it begins to discriminate against people in certain neighborhoods, because if I have to go in this neighborhood and I have to write a minimum of 25 summonses or 50 summonses per month, I'm discriminated against them. And the system is set up to say that if I don't do that, then I'm going to be penalized. I'm not going to have my job. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get suspended if I don't do these things, and I would say that they need to have that set up. And the other thing, when you look at the system, is that we need to have the politicians more involved. Like I said, they cover a particular area in a district and they don't know that the crime is taking place. How do you represent an area when you don't know that the crime is taking place and you're supposed to be representing them? You're getting their votes so you could be in office, but you're not talking about the issues that they may be complaining about to you. You don't even know about it. So I suggested to the politicians, come do a ride along, ride in the police car. When we get the call, you have your vest on and you get out and you talk.
You said they'll put the vest on too. How many took you up on that?
0.
Wow.
And I did it on.
For those of you that are watching, I know people are just joining on. This is Dr. Oscar Odom, former deputy commissioner for NYPD, among a number of other things. Lifetime career officer in NYPD. You taught in the police academy, investigations, detective, intelligence division, and just sharing with us now. He has retired from that, but speaking with us now about where we are as a nation. We understand that people watch us from all over the world. Where New York goes, the country goes, So Dr. Odom, let me ask you this, kind of picking this up, because I know I started with the question of we're in an economic place that we've probably never seen since 1929, 1930, 1931, and what was going on with the stock market and everything then in the crash. Obviously, now we're dealing with a racial reckoning, perhaps that unlike ever before. We have a confluence of all these things. How has the disruption so let me ask it this way. How was the disruption of both 2020, how we saw COVID and Black Lives Matter, quite frankly, how have those twin sort of phenomena change the way we see law enforcement acting in New York?
Oh, it's definitely changed. For both sides, it was, I would say, uncharted waters with the COVID there, because you had to do so many different things. There was no proper training involved with it. And it was just that you were out there and then whatever happened, and people were using whatever tactics, whatever methods they learned from before, and they used that there. But the COVID got a chance to bring out a lot of things that were hitting or things that were known to some, and it came with a spotlight. And the thing is, like I said, the good thing about it is, like Dr. Martin Luther King said, rioting is the language of the unheard.
That's right.
So it was the language of the unheard. And for me, it was appreciated because it began to bring some issues to the forefront to cause us to address those issues and to look at those issues and see, what's going on. Recently I just was looking at some stuff and I found this book, Black Shields, and it talks about police officers who did stuff about from the New York City Police Department, different things. And to my surprise, I was in the book about how I reached out to the community, how I helped, how I used to provide training programs to help people go through the process, and even as an officer to help people when I was out there, because like I said, life and death is in the power of the tongue. So I would rather talk to you and work with you because I was born and raised in the project.
Yeah.
So I know what it's like. I feel your pain.
And I think that makes a difference. I've shared on this platform, Dr. Odom, so many times that it bothers me that people who make decisions for our communities, I just started speaking generally, are many times people who've never been in the communities, or the only time that they've been in is when they're writing a ticket, they're handcuffing someone, or they're riding through very quickly and rolling up those windows and locking them. And so, I know that, and I know we've discussed this, kind of before, but I know there's kind of two models. You've got the community policing model where you might have people who live in the community there, right? Excuse me, the officers, I mean, there's that model. But then because they live in that community, there's the other side of it where people say they may not be safe, they may be susceptible to corruption, it might not be fair for them to be there and their families are there. So there's that side, and then there's the other piece that says, well, have them be from another community. And that's what we sort of are seeing, where people are and I think you talked about this the last time you weren't here. Remember you shared that the folks that were working in Madison Square Garden, that the officers had a completely different mindset about their work than the ones that were busting down doors in the Bronx. So how do we shift that? I know you can't, I'm not asking you to share anything sensitive here, but you've obviously been in leadership meetings. I mean, you've been a part of the leadership where I'm sure there have been other people who look nothing, had cared nothing about these communities who are making decisions. How do you navigate that, even as a decision maker?
Right. Well, one of the things is that, of course, you have to be able to speak up because you're able to speak the language, so to speak. Okay. And then when you are respected amongst your peers, you get a chance to at least say it and put it on the table that's there. And one of the key things, like in doing that, when I speak to the communities, I said, look, how we treat each other also impacts how other people treat us. That's very important. If people see us treating ourselves bad, even though it doesn't give them the right to, they, in your mind, subconsciously, you can say they're not even treating each other right. So why do I, And so the thing is, this is that, and it's not an excuse, because if you're in that position, you're supposed to be able to do it regardless of whatever like that. I always tell people it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice.
You always do that. Yes.
And so when you're there, it's your job. Like I always felt, I took it personally, and I give an example. One time I worked in the 8-1 precinct, which was in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Okay. While I was working in the 8-1 precinct, I actually lived in the 8-1 precinct. And the reason how that mishap happened, because I just came home from the military and they had my old address. So when they stationed me in the precinct in which I lived. I loved it. Great travel time. I knew my community. My community knew me. I was good. I felt I was in heaven because I was able to talk to them, and then there were issues. If it was some sort of problem, whatever, I was able to have some sort of dialogue, which is key.
Absolutely. And your experience did not start right when you started that job there.
Oh, definitely not.
That's your experience with that community. And I don't think it has to be because you're in the same race, so you've necessarily grown up there, but I think it's different when your only experiences, because we've had these conversations. I've told you that going to Harvard, and I mean, I love the experience, but I've always told people that we have to learn their world much more than they have to learn our world.
Oh, no doubt.
Hands down. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Yes.
So it bothers me when I'm in rooms and I'm hearing people say things and I'm sitting here like, what the heck do you know about anything going on in this community except what you saw or maybe Fox,
right, right.
them, so how do, so let me ask you this, because I know it had to have been rough being a officer during this period. Because like you said, it's uncharted territory. People really don't know. What was it like for you just navigating that line of being, because I hear people talk about blue lives mattering, right? Which of course every life matters, but you're not born blue, right? So how did you navigate being a brother in times where I'm sure there were people like, bro, you really gonna lock me up? You gonna really do this?
Right. Oh, right. Well, I could give you an example that actually something that happened to me. I'll give you a prime example. Numerous things happen. I'm working in a precinct, 778 Crown Heights in the 80s, very busy, crime-ridden, whatever like this. I go to a scene, the guy's having a fight. The guy in the Chinese restaurant wanted to fight the black man over the telephone. The black man was on the telephone. So he gave him what they call a fair one. Had a fight, the black guy won. Chinese guy from the restaurant called the precinct, called 911 and said that he was robbed. Officers responded to the scene, put the cuff on him, whatever like this. And the guy said right away, there was an officer who was here previously and he let me go, which was me. Sergeant called me back to the scene. Sergeant said, Oscar, I know you're a good cop. What happened? I said, he wanted a fair one over the phone, the fight. He lost. So he won. I said, that's it. He should not be. I said, he should not be locked up. Let me take the cuffs off him. My sergeant, who was white, said, I believe you, Oscar. If you said he should not, take the cuffs off. I took the cuffs off him. I put him in my car. I took him home. I opened up the door like valet service. And I told the young brother, I'm sorry for the inconveniences that you had because of this nonsense. And my white sergeant listened to me because he knew how I was. And he let me take the handcuffs off the guy and drive him away. I could have said nothing, but I knew what happened. And I had to speak out, and I had to speak out in front of all of my white fellow officers. And I said, no, take the cuffs off him.
And that's a powerful story. And, the question becomes, how many times does that happen with other officers and they feel like they can't speak up? I'm not going to say they don't and make it a sign. Maybe they just don't feel like they can. It's a culture where they don't. And then it becomes systematic. That becomes my concern, where even if individually they like Oscar, so they listen to Oscar, the colleague, Oscar, my boss, Oscar, the one that I roll with, who's now my, battle buddy. Right. But why systematically do we have the issues that we have? So let me shift this a bit and talk to you about this. We know that mass incarceration is probably one of the largest issues that is surrounding the discussion around reform, justice, laws, all that. There's a lot of peeling back of the 1990s where people were saying super predators. And a lot of that is when we know better, we do better. Because that's not Republicans and Democrats. Everybody's on the wrong side of the issue. Let me ask you this about mass incarceration. And I thought about it as you talked about what you talked about. Because what you basically shared is a story where your power and influence kept a street fight from becoming a legal ensnarement, which would have been a record for this man, which could have turned into all types of other things.
Yes.
And we know more than not, based on race, based on who you know, based on where you grew up, that when you have similar situations, certain people handle on the golf course, other people, they have a record. So where do you feel we're going with mass incarceration? Do you think as a law enforcement realizes it's an issue too? Is it still a struggle? What's your thinking?
Well, I definitely realize it. I think now, with Biden in it, there's going to be some more changes regarding mass incarceration. And so unique that you would say that. I'd tell you another personal story. I wound up going to a military school, a high school, on a football scholarship. I just was talking to my wife about this. We take a trip to the courthouse in Long Island. My military school was in Long Island. So we go to the courthouse. So I just so happened to ask the judge in front of everybody, why do you lock up so many brown and black people? Why do you lock up so many? You know what the judge told me? And this was in 1977. He said, because they have no place to go. So that's why I figure if I lock them up, they'd be okay. But the white kids, they have some place to go. This is straight out of his mouth to my class, my military school. The judge said that too.
You know, if I could just say though, I've never heard you say that actually. That, rather than making me angry, actually adds clarity. I mean, it still sounds outrageous, and I don't know if I believe that even he bought that. But hold on now, wait a minute. I want to be a little open-minded here. It makes you then wonder, because it does bespeak of a larger point, which is when you think about all of the money that was shifted in the 70s and 80s from mental institutions, from institutions that were social institutions that were catering to those populations that, the Boys and Girls Clubs, those types of things, when all of that money got shifted from that to lock them up, throw away the key.
Right.
So it makes you wonder, because here really what he's saying is, I'm part of the problem, but don't just blame me.
Right, exactly.
Because I didn't lock them up. I'm saying as the judge, right? Because you're saying, because he's sentencing them, but he's not locking them up. It's many hands, right?
Yeah.
That got involved in this. It took one to arrest. It took another prosecutor to overlook their whole life and say, oh no, I still want to charge them with 20 years. Then it took a judge to look at it and say, rubber stamp it.
Right. Well, you see, you just showed also, what you just showed is how people get paid. It's economical.
Speak on it.
First you get the cop with the arrest, so he getting paid because he got you. Now he's taking you to the courthouse, right? So before you go to the courthouse, you go into the correctional facility. So you got the correction officer, he's getting paid. So now they may pass you over to either the probation officer, the parole officer, they getting paid. Now you go into the courthouse, so now you got a defense attorney and a prosecutor, he getting paid. The next you got the judge, he's getting paid. Now everybody got paid off for all of that. So now while you incarcerate, they got a doctor, they got a nurse, they got to give you clothes, they got to give you bed. Everybody's getting paid.
Everybody's getting paid. Then when they're released, then it's a whole, so what, you did whatever time you did. So now it's, well, wait a minute, there's probation, there's parole, there's supervised release, and it's all of these things that are in place. I have a banner that's going across the street. I didn't even expect to really put this up here, but Dr. Odom, you said something that really pointed out what, the reason why I'm passionate about this is because my office released this year a Jobs and Justice Initiative, which is where we are highly involved in the goal of getting 100,000 people from disenfranchised communities to get hired in 2021. And we're doing this by working with employers. So I just put this up here, obviously. If people are employers and things like that, reach out, because we're helping employers with this. But I'm saying this, Dr. Odom, because this is why it's Jobs and Justice. And I'm just going to say this. I feel like the Lord dropped that in my heart, those words, jobs, justice, because I felt angry. And you and I have had conversations about reform, talking about reform without talking about the economic distribution, inequality, inequity. I don't want to get on here and tell people to stop shooting each other. Give people a job.
Right.
Give people opportunity. So what you're saying, and that's what made me, when we start to get to the basis of it, the system in place today has less to do with morality and has more to do with money.
Economics.
It's follow the money, people.
Yes.
And we know that COVID disrupted a lot of that. I just saw Cuomo on the news earlier today begging for $15 billion for, I don't know what it's for, but assumably some of that, and I may have just made up that word, but y'all know what I'm trying to say, some of that money is going to prisons, it's going to Rikers, it's going to the same status quo that they're saying that they want to break. So I just wonder, how do you break it until you break it?
Well, I could say redistribute. I don't want to call it the wealth, but redistribute the wealth. If it costs over $100,000 per person for them to be incarcerated, you could take half of that, put them in school, give them a program. You can actually pay them that salary to stay out of trouble, right? Go to school. We can help you pay your rent, whatever like this, and even have programs set up because you have so much of a surplus of that money to make sure that you guide them and do it. You know, I know this is a unique, weird example to use because of the thing that happened with the person, but the Cosby Show. The Cosby Show showed a family, and people try to say, oh, that wasn't my family. But what you didn't realize, there's a lot of people that are like that book, Our Kind of People. So, you know, there are people who, you know, there are people who do live like that.
Yes.
You know, so there is a difference. So the thing is, this is, and we know that the mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Yes.
So that if we took some of these monies, redistribute that wealth to training programs to help people get apartments, it'll be a whole lot better. The crime rate will definitely go down. You can provide more stability in the family because remember, some of these programs broke them up. A lot of people may be too young to know that back in the 60s and 70s when they had welfare, and welfare, you were only allowed to make a certain amount of money. They used to come into your apartment and inspect your house, and you could only have a certain amount of clothes, a certain amount of food. You couldn't have a man in the house, or else they threw you out of the projects.
Hold on. For you going any further, did you and I talk about this at all?
No.
I just want to be clear on that. I just did a broadcast yesterday. For those who didn't watch it, so you don't think go to my broadcast yesterday. I was just taking them through. I did a whole 2 hours, Dr. Odom, on because I was talking about Chicago. Because everybody talks about why is Chicago like it is. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the housing from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and all of the projects that were built there, the policies that put them all in the South Side, all of the things that were being done there, and the fact of how once they were realizing in the 80s and 90s across the country that many of these building projects were a failure and that they were causing more crime and all of those things, that's when there became this discussion about how to disperse it. And that's when exactly what you're talking about. All of these things came to be about, well, we're going to put them in mixed income housing. And they started rejiggering all of the way that housing structure looked. And one of the big pieces was, I know I'm saying a lot, but I got excited because I want people to know this. In many cities, Chicago, New York, Baltimore, I believe LA was another one. You could not have two parents in the same home in order to get the voucher. Is that not crazy? That is a matter of policy. They encourage.
And nobody, I know, and nobody can't tell me that it's not true because I lived it. So I know firsthand. I know firsthand.
And then people want to now, 30 years later, talk about black on black crime in a vacuum, as if it just happened, as if communities just sprung up where where poverty is stricken and concentrated in certain areas. And what the weapon was formed, it didn't just appear, right? So how do we begin to change this, Oscar?
First of all, I tell them sometimes look at the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy.
You might have to give us one for our generation. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I know. Because
what was Trading Places about again? It was two people, right?
Right. You know, guy went to Harvard. He's a businessman. Everything worked. He lived a posh life on the Upper East Side with Muffy and Buffy and all of them, all the clubs. And then all of a sudden, these two other rich guys made a bet that if he was given in the same circumstance of somebody in poverty, how he would act. And also that if the person of color, which was Eddie Murphy, if he was given the opportunity to be around, to be cultured, to be financed, how would he act? And they found out that it worked out exactly how they thought. Eddie Murphy became professional. He was trading on Wall Street. He was doing everything. The other guy lost his mind, started doing robberies, started doing stealing. So they seen the white guy just go crazy, you know?
Wow. My experience, kind of sharing a bit here, and I talk about this in my book, Come Back Swinging. And you know this because I talk with you during this time. My experience on the inside really changed my mind exactly in that, because what the inside, particularly federal custody, does is it brings together all those types of people. You've got ones that were congressmen, people who warlords over in Africa, folks who just made poor decisions here, people who were money laundering, people, all types of folks, and what the gang leaders, people who ran these huge organizations. And this is what I found. The bank president and the one who was running, whatever set you might call it, that had 50 soldiers under them, they kind of operated with a similar mindset, and you wondered if they had the same opportunities growing up, if it would have manifested the same.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's the thing. A lot of times, and it's unfortunate, like certain times how they say your zip code can dictate to a certain degree how you're going to come out, or what you're going to do, what you're around, and they show you the different areas, how many people from this zip code come out this way, how many people from this zip code come out this way, and the different things that you have. And you remember a while ago, I had shared with you the article they had in the newspaper years ago, where in the cheese houses in my projects and the Tonkin housing projects, how they painted it like prisons, because they said the majority of the people from my projects went to prison. So that's why the New York City Housing Authority painted the cheese houses in the back like prisons, and they got sued. And then that's when they changed it. It was in the newspaper, and they were saying, well, the majority of people from these projects, they go to prison. So we wanted them to feel at home.
We wanted to get them ready for the which is why you have some companies that are licensed by certain states to both feed the schools, the inner city schools, and feed prisoners in the prison.
Yes.
So again, it's that same sort of kind of prep thing happening. When we talk about economic redistribution, I mean, that's such a deep, heavy word. I mean, this goes back to Marcus Garvey. I mean, it goes back before then, but Marcus Garvey, they got rid of him quickly. To this day, I think he's the only person that was deported from America on a federal charge based on, I think they were ultimately able to convict him for fraud in something dealing with the mail for a postage stamp of 5 cents. They had to get rid of him because he had created the United Negro Improvement Association, which was the forerunner of the NAACP. And what his thinking is we've got to stop just talking about justice in the sense of removing chains. We've got to talk about justice in the sense of redistributing wealth. Because when you go back to 1860, 3, 4, 5, whenever, Emancipation Proclamation, you told people to be free, but free to do what?
Right.
Free to go where? People didn't even know what money was. They had never. So how do we, and we can't talk about one without the other, right? So how do we talk about economic? I mean, some people say segregation. Obviously, that's not what we're advocating.
Right.
But I've shared, Dr. Odom, that I think the more integrated we've become, we've also become, in some ways, it has diminished the power. In many ways, it's diminished the power of our dollar. I mean, this is going somewhere totally different.
No, but I understand.
But I guess, so let me ask you, how do you think money and crime play a part, or do they? And I don't mean necessarily a person to person, on a large scale, on a macro level.
Right. Well, the unique part about it is, like the song "For the Love of Money," what people will do, money, 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 and certain times, like that other saying is that people say money's not that important, but they say it's right up there next to oxygen,
Yeah.
So you realize the importance of it. But I think part of it is showing people that when the economics is distributed, people can, it can make it better for everybody. But sometimes with the competitive attitude, some people just want to have that much more than others and displace them, or like that book Caste, which is a deep book, put people in certain categories and so that they could feel better, so that they have one up on them or whatever like this. So that's always going to be an issue because people worry about that, the competitive spirit, and also to be better, to be hierarchy. And a lot of people don't realize that, excuse me, given a certain same opportunities, a lot of times things definitely would be different, you know? So so that's a big thing to look at. So when we look at the economics, and if people see that they are benefiting from it, then that helps them out. Because the thing is this, is that people know that they need money, and if they don't have it, there's certain things that they will do in order to get this money. So it has to be redistributed in a way that can help people. And then also people have to realize their purchasing power when it comes time to buying stuff, when you can say, if you don't do this for me, then you're not getting my dollar, because the color of the dollar is green, bottom line. So this is what I want, regardless of this, and it can change. So we have to look at ways of moving forward. These different things from COVID and Black Lives Matter have definitely changed the barometer. People, they're looking in different directions and they're trying to see what's going to happen. And if people hold back their dollars, no matter how small it is, because we are the biggest consumers, and if dollars are held back or changed to a different direction, you get people attention.
Oh, you definitely do. And I think when you start really talking about the economic piece, it makes people shift in their seats a little bit, because people don't mind you talking about how a company should have, a slogan, we love the community, for the community, hashtag Plo Black, all the stuff, the emoji with the puffy hair. Right. But when you start talking about who's on your board, let's talk about that. I don't care about your commercials. Who's on your board? What's the percentage of the people on your C-suite, your leadership, your CFO, I'm not talking about your diversity person, I'm talking your CFO, your CEO, your COO. What's the percentage of those that are women, that are Asian, that are Black, brown? And then you start having an entirely different discussion. I noticed that. But I think it has to happen, because one without the other, you see, is really it's not a genuine conversation. Because we've already shared, you were just kind of sharing how the money plays. So just another point is, you think Rikers. I was just sharing this on my platform earlier, that I believe, we've seen that part of why the movement kind of happened to get Rikers closed, even though it's not closed yet, but, to push for this 10-year plan, was that the criminal justice reform allies had this sort of uncanny friend that came along, and these were people who wanted to use the land for real estate, because they understand we've got prime real estate. What are you doing? Yeah, put them in jails anywhere else, but get rid of let's get this land freed. So, I want to ask you this too. We saw last year, 2020. It's kind of funny. Side note: I saw this meme where I wish I could pull it up here. I should have been prepared, but it's a meme where it's a Black guy with a tear coming down, and it says, me when the stimulus checks came out, when we were told that reparations couldn't happen. That was like the meme, because remember, I was one of those people too that said, who's really talking about reparations? Trillions? Nobody has that type of money. Then COVID happened.
Right.
Okay. They found money very quick. And look, all jokes aside, Notice how the money went to the Shake Shacks. No, no shade to them. I love their burgers. I
Right.
don't think they qualified for small business loans, but we saw then how even when the government was best positioned to use money to help people in a time of crisis, that even then they were incapable of doing it.
Right. Well, see, that's why one of the things that came out of this election was the importance of voting. You see what happened when you vote. And when it came to the Senate races, they got more people registered because people didn't want to vote even then. And when they seen that Biden won, they said, oh, this voting thing could work. So they came out. So that's how Georgia also got their other two U.S. senators, their first Black U.S. senator and their first Jewish U.S. senator.
Morehouse College, by the way, let me just throw that out there. Morehouse.
Yes,
Morehouse.
yes,
That's
yes.
right, Reverend Warnock. Yeah.
Right, yeah, Reverend Warnock. Yeah, he's a Morehouse man, HBCU. I know that, you know.
His wife actually was in my class.
Oh, okay.
Spelman, though, because he was Spelman.
Okay, yeah, he's a HBCU. He's an Alpha too, you know. I know that.
You're
So,
a trendsetter.
right, he's a trendsetter, you know. I give him his props, Divine Nine. You know, I'm cute sci-fi, so I give him a little shout out. So
I'm not an alpha, but I didn't tell you my father's an alpha. Did I ever tell you that?
No.
Look, I told somebody that in college. He said, my father's an alpha. He said, really? I said, he's an omega too. He said, that's not possible. I said, he's the beginning and the end. The first and the last.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. So that's the key, economics, redistributing wealth.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Let's talk about solutions. I know we don't have much time left, 6:30, we're coming in the last 15 minutes. Thank you for everyone that's joining us. For those of you that's watching, go to darrellbennett.com, go to comebackswinging.com. If you are interested in being a part of us helping 100, we are working hard to get 100,000 people from disenfranchised communities to across the country. This isn't just New York, to get hired. And we're doing that by working with employers. We're not doing that by work. So if you are a job seeker, do not send us your resume. But if you're an employer, reach out to us. We have a network. But Dr. Odom, let's go to solutions. People are watching, and some people are just nervous about what in the world is about to happen. Let me just ask this really quickly first. Is it going to get worse before it gets better?
Yes.
Why? And in what way?
Well, one of the reasons why is because of people are still trying to navigate these uncharted waters with COVID-19, also part with the systemic racism, trying to find their balance, trying to find out what's going on. So in the process, things are going to get turned upside down. People are not going to know where they're going. They're going to be lost to a certain extent until people begin to pull it together and learn how to navigate in these uncharted waters. And it's shark infested too, because people are jumping out there. It's new territories. It's how do I get this? If I'm working online now, before I used to work here, I don't have a computer. I need access. How do I get here? So it's gonna get worse because people got to get on board with this new world. They have to be able to adapt.
What laws? You brought up a lot of points. We're already seeing this on the talent, because a lot of my work is working with, talent acquisition, folks that are doing hiring. And we're already seeing this where the questions of jurisdiction are starting to come up. Because now if I can hire somebody online, why do I care what city they're in? And let's take this further. If I used to pay a software engineer in California or New York $120,000, I can get that same person in Poland to do the job for $30,000.
Yes.
And then what does that do for transnational laws? And what does that do for people here in this country that have already been locked out of jobs, locked out of opportunities? Does that further?
Oh, yes. But the thing is, like I said, we are a resilient people.
Yes,
we are. And I don't mean to say this lightly. If we can survive slavery, there ain't nothing that we cannot survive, And the difference, the different turmoil that has happened in this country, regardless of race, religion, or color, the coalition that was built for this recent election, we have people from all walks of life to come in and put them in office. And so now we're looking for the change that people voted for. And we have to stay resilient. We can't
Yeah.
give up. You know, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you give up.
How many times?
You know,
I love you for that. Be inspirational. But can I just talk about the fact that we didn't all elect this president and vice president here. There were 70 million people that walked, took a bus, a bike, presumably some drove, flew to a poll and voted after all we saw in the last 4 years. So I'm concerned that our country is a lot more fractured. There are a lot of, look, can I just say this really quickly? I was looking at a QAnon website. I don't even know what I had any business doing beyond the fact that I'm just curious that this is really happening, that there are really people who really thought the military was going to intervene in the election. That boggled my mind that people thought that was really going to happen. And we're only now realizing the scope that people believe that. How do you think, so you have Defense Secretary, I think his first name is Lloyd, but Austin, right? First black man.
Yes.
Yes.
Lloyd Austin III. Yes.
Secretary of Defense. Exactly. He's saying that they are looking at all levels of the military to root out extremism, which is concerning. That we have people in law enforcement and military that are a part of these cells, let's call it what it is, that are some are terrorist cells, they are white supremacist groups, the extremist group. You were deeply ingrained in the NYPD, and even though you've retired, you still are. How does an organization weed people out from within that are extremists? How do you know?
Right. So, of course, you have to put all different types of measures, all different types of investigations to get to these people. It's just like what Lloyd Austin III did when he came into his job. He let go 47 high-level people that was from the previous administration. He said, I'm getting rid of you. Either you can resign or I'm getting rid of you. 47 people. He's like, he had to clean house in order to move forward with his agenda. So what happens is, the great thing about it is, like I always tell people, is that in America, we have democracy. It definitely was tested, and so far it has prevailed. And that was the good thing. We got a chance to really test it, as opposed to talking about it. We really got tested this time. And now we've seen how it prevailed and how the Constitution held up during all of this turmoil. And we may have not got everything that we wanted, but it held up, that we're able to move forward. Because the thing is, like I said, people,
you know what? Somebody needs to play God Bless America after this, because you're very optimistic about this. Can I say this though, Dr. Odom? Those 47 that General Austin relieved of their duty, they were easy to pinpoint because they were on boards that the outgoing President Trump appointed. These, boards that, are like sort of credentializing things. So my question is, though, how do you find the ones that are hiding in plain sight? Or, excuse me, they're not, you can't identify them because they weren't recently appointed, you know?
Well, eventually people will show their true colors. And when you look at these different things, this is how you begin to pick them off. You could even start off by saying, all those who remember this, please raise your hand. And you still might get some takers, and you'll be able to identify them right away. But the other ones, you have to work and get it. And it takes people of all races, of all religions, a coalition to weed out these people, like we've seen in these different marches across the country. We have people of all races, all religions come out and speak out against all these atrocities and all these different things that were taking place. So that's the thing. We have to keep that positive mindset, despite everything that is going on around, like that poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, you know what I'm saying?
When all men doubt you,
that's right.
For their doubting too. You're right. And let me ask you something really quick. I had this epiphany, revelation, I'll call it, when I was watching Training Day for the 125th time. Because, every time they play, and I'm going somewhere with this, I want you to know. Every time they play this thing on FX or whatever, I'm like, why? Because I end up getting drawn in. I've always had the complaint that a lot of people have had, which is, why would you give Malcolm, I called the man Malcolm. Denzel Washington the Oscar for that and not for Malcolm. Of course, you wait for him to act,
right,
like, you know what I want to say, acting crazy and all of this stuff. And I've always held that view until literally I watched it for the 125th time and I felt like I saw something completely different. And I wondered this, and this is why I'm asking you this now. I wonder if, like many movies, producers are trying to plant a seed, right? They always are trying to plant a seed. Would Hollywood, so let's say the seed, the plant, was that there are officers that are hiding in plain sight that are using everything in their disposal and power to corrupt the system, right? Perhaps that's the seed. They knew they could not have a white man playing that role. It wouldn't look right. So they pick a Denzel, because I always looked at it as, sure, you get him to play the crazy man. But maybe this was subtly their way of exposing the unfortunate white privilege structure that's in this country, that you can't really look at a white man acting like that. I'm picking your brain. What do you think about that? But they're willing to see Denzel acting that way. But the point is that there are people doing that.
Right. And that's the thing, in a lot of the stuff we get a lot of hidden messages or subliminal messages when we look at these things. Malcolm was too powerful to give him the Oscar for Malcolm. That's so powerful. And I feel the same sentiments. Then for him to get it for Training Day, for being like a Nicky Barnes or something like that, and you're going to give it to him for that, I think he still should have got it from Malcolm, character, the plane, and the message is, excuse me, when you look at this, you see, that it is uncovering, as you stated, more stuff. And the weird part about it is when it comes to corruption, we're never at the highest level. It's not us. We're never at the highest level. It's them that's the highest level. Even though we be high to other people, we're not the highest level.
And can I tell you, that's why there are people who they're very adamant that there's a difference between prejudice and racism. Prejudice is when you have a bias. Racism is when you have power structurally, institutionally, and systematically over that power. That's what you're talking about.
Oh, definitely.
This isn't just about, I don't want my daughter to marry somebody outside of our culture. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking when you have the power of state, you have the power of government, you have the power of influence, and systematically you tie that bias to systems. Yeah.
So the dual thing that I see that came out of all of this stuff, like I said, we tested our Constitution. We see that it's strong. We see our democracy. And though even in the voting, we had, a big divide, but then also we had a lot of common stuff in there too, because it took the common stuff in order for the people to come into vote to prevail. And so when we looked at the marches across the country, when we looked even in the Black Lives Matter protests, when we seen people from all colors, all races, all religions being a part of this, this showed you the soul of humanity trying to come out and expressing their thoughts. So, when we look at the lens, people, I say, you're looking at the lens, I said, look at the people that came out though, across the globe, internationally, all races, all religions came out and they marched and they protested and they did all of these things, and some of them locked up, injured for the cause. We can't deny that, we can't deny that. And we got to look at and be able to take it and say, okay, so this happened, let's run with it. Let's make sure we put stuff in place. Yeah, that other stuff happening, that's okay. Let's move forward. We're not going to forget it. But while we're able to move forward and build coalitions, we got to do that.
We got to do it. And I agree with moving forward. I liked that President Biden said in his inauguration speech, to heal, we must remember. And he paused and he said it again, to heal, we must remember. And I think there's always a balance between moving on and remembering.
Oh, definitely.
And I always feel like America's ready to move on much quicker when it comes to things that happen in our community. I mean, think about September 11th. This is still like never forget. I mean, we're still talking about the Alamo And that was how long ago? And yet we talk about Trayvon Martin and people are like, y'all still stuck on that? That was 3 whole years ago, 4, 5, 7, you know. So I think I agree with you that we're seeing the soul of humanity break through, but I also think America's at an existential crisis. Look at the Republican Party. They're still trying to figure out as a party whether or not white supremacy has a home there. That's really what they're trying to figure out. I mean,
exactly, and that's why they have the Lincoln Project also, those who are away from those psycho viewpoints, you know. So that's where, you know, they're looking for the soul, and they separate it from that.
You're going to be running for congressman under the Republican banner, and it's a little bit. I would surmise that if I am a, you know, George W. Bush, I am furious about what has happened to the Republican Party.
Oh,
yeah, because it wasn't like this. It was not. You know, it's funny when I tell people in my history classes, when I tell them about how the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln. That was the party of progression all the way up until, really, I would say, when Kennedy, you know, was able to kind of schmooze that whole thing in the 1960 election. But for 100 solid years, and that's why many older Black people don't understand the whole Democratic wave.
Yeah.
You know? So what has happened? Solutions, and I know we've run out of time. So let me just ask you this as we're closing. What do you say to people who say, I want to be an officer. I want to be a police. I want to either be an officer, or I want to be a captain. I want to be a chief. I want to change the system. But like you, Dr. Odom, I live in these neighborhoods. It definitely ain't cool to tell people I want to be one, you know? And I'm not even so sure I do, because even though I want to be one, what I'm seeing doesn't really align with what I think justice should look like. So I don't even know if I want to be on their side. What do you say to that person?
First of all, I can speak personally from my experience that I never wanted to be one either. And my father said to me, if you want to make a change, ways to make a change is by getting inside, you know? And so the thing is, this is that also I would say to them, if you're worried about that, say to yourself, it's either me or him, right? So either he's going to police you or you're going to be a part of it, you know? And that's the key point right there. So it's going to go one way or the other. The choice is up to you. Either you're going to be a part of it or they're going to be policing you, you know? And so when you get in there, like I said, the thing is this, you'll get in there, you'll be able to change stuff. You'll be able to see that also that there are a lot of like minds inside there, and sometimes they may get influenced for other things. But like I said, and I can attest to over 20 years in the business that there are a lot of good police officers in there of all races that are in there.
Yes.
And you have bad apples in there, like you do in any other organizations, and some go on into it, and because of the power that's invested in them, which makes things worse because now you have the power to take life and property.
Yes.
So the thing is, so you have to look at that. So be the change that you want, you know, go in and be that change. Go into there and change the thing around, express your viewpoint, be able to sit down at the table like Shirley Chisholm said. You know, if they don't give me a chair, I bring a chair to the table. You know what I'm saying? I have my own chair. And let me tell you, and saying, you know, when we reflect, when I was thinking about having this conversation with you and seeing how all the change happened, my reflection was, I graduated from elementary school, PS 23, Carter G. Woodson Elementary School. Wow. Carter G. Woodson, right? Carter G. Woodson, you know, father of Black history, you know, Carter G. Woodson, right? I was the valedictorian of my class.
That's
and the guest speaker at my graduation from elementary school was Shirley Chisholm, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. So I got pictures of me and Shirley Chisholm when I was the valedictorian, because she was the guest speaker at my graduation, which was Carter G. Woodson. So for me, I'm embedded. I have no way out. To whom much is given, much is required. And I have to say this, and that's why I volunteered, like it said in that book, Black Shields. I volunteered in our communities to show them how to interact with the police And also I volunteer my time to provide free tutoring so that you could take the exam, and we set up a thing to help funnel you through the whole process to make sure that you were squared away when you came through the process. And then when you got in there, we said, don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you came from. When you go out there, remember the people. Extend the olive branch. Remember, you was once there, you know? So now you should be more compassionate. You should be able to understand. You should be able to realize that chapter and quote from the Bible, life and death is in the power of the tongue. What you say next can give somebody life or death. So be a part of it. Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
How can people find you, Dr. Odom? Because I know there are people on this platform that's going to want to engage with you. How can they follow you?
Well, I'm always on LinkedIn. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter also.
Twitter.
You can see me, you know, and you can see me do my different things. Like I said, go ahead.
Snapchat? You on Snapchat?
No Snapchat. No Snapchat. Twitter and LinkedIn, you know. And the thing is, like I said, I get a chance to, you know, talk the talk and also walk the walk. Like I said, right. I'm on Fox telling them hands in the pocket, knee on the neck. I spoke out against it. I was on in this international news speaking out against an international organization that tried to say Black Lives Matter was a terrorist organization. I denied it. I refuted it. And I got on there and said, I come from the largest police department in the world. I trained over 200,000. We are not a terrorist organization. Black Lives Matter is not. And I refuted their data. I disproved their data. I did all that. That's why we have to be in these positions, because we're able to stand up and be able to set the record straight and be able to speak on their level about what they're talking about. So we need you in there. Put on that uniform. Take that test. We need you there. Look at the police department now. All the people, we got all these chiefs. The chief of detectives is a brother, you know, a Black man. The chief of transportation is a Black woman. The chief of patrol, the first one in the history of the New York City Police Department, is a Black woman. These are all Black people who are conscious and who care about the community and who care about all communities, but they also care about their own community.
Yes, I love that. And I think that's a great way to end. If you are listening, you should be empowered to know that you're needed. Don't listen to this nonsense. There's something, I want to be very clear. There's some people who, because of the negativity that has been perpetuated in some of our communities, you're listening and you've been told, oh, you shouldn't be a police officer, you shouldn't go in law enforcement. No, that's all the more reason that we need you in positions of power. You see what happens when, you know, Dr. Odom said it. Either you do the policing or somebody else will be policing you. So that's why we're working. And I want to, again, just extend DarylBennett.com, comebackswinging.com for those of you that are interested. Organizations that are part of, we're highly involved with mentorship. We're hugely involved with connecting organizations with other organizations where people are being developed, they're being trained to be leaders. One of the things that kind of dropped in my heart early on was we shape the people that shape the world. Now, I know, Dr. Odom, that's a big statement. It really is. But you know what? When Elon Musk decided what he was going to do 20 years ago, it was a big statement. When Jeff Bezos told his wife they were going to drive across the country and they didn't even know where they were going to, you know, live over in California, they said, you know, that was going to be a big thing. And this is not for a business. This is not for a company. This is for the uplifting of a nation.
Yes.
So how much the more? If you are interested in being a part of this movement, we need you to sign up, and we can definitely give advisement as to what the next steps are so you can fully unlock your potential and you can be seated in these places and positions of prominence. Because like you said, Dr. Odom, this is where it's at. I mean, I can't tell you how many pictures we saw during COVID where on a federal level, decisions were being made as to the trillions, not billions, not millions, but trillions of dollars that were being dispersed, whether it would be among the restaurant groups. I remember that time they had that meeting where all of the folks were there from like the Pfizer and all of those pharmaceuticals, and they were rolling out the plan. And they're all talking about, oh, we want these communities vaccinated, but where were we standing up there?
Right.
And that's why these things are important. That's why, you know, we're so adamant about being, involved in these things. Did you want to say anything else?
Yes. Well, one thing real quick. The Super Bowl was the other day, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers won. And what I would tell people is, from a diversity standpoint, if you ever get a chance, look at Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff. The most diverse coaching staff in the entire NFL. Look at their staff. Look at their staff from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You talking about people of color, you talking about women. Look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff. It will blow your mind. There's strength in diversity.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
When we get stronger, everybody gets stronger.
That's right.
As a people, as a country, we all get stronger, lifting as we climb.
That's right. And
if we lift people up, then that's it. Pay it forward. Make sure that we do these things. That's the key to making sure, and I like to end on one of your notes. Dr. Benjamin E. Mays.
Come on.
Morehouse, man. President Morehouse. Member of Omega Psi Phi. Mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King.
There we go.
He says, one of my favorite things with Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, he says this. He says, life is just a minute. Only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to you to use it or lose it. Give an account if you abuse it. Life is just a minute, but eternity is in it.
Come on. I can't even. Is there a mic? Somebody hand me a mic so I can drop it. Yes, exactly. And I want to ask you, for all of you listening, what you going to do with your moment? What are you going to do with your moment? Your season is now, and there's something in you that's going to change the world. And somebody listening, I'm telling you, you're going to run countries, you're going to run institutions, you're going to run companies, you're going to change the landscape of this world with inventions and with ideas. You are a change maker. You are a generation stronghold breaker. But I want you to understand, your moment is now to unlock that. Unlock it, because we need you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Odom, so much for this.
Thanks for having me.
I always love just exchanging with you, really, because on a real note, I appreciate, one, your personal journey with me, because through all my personal stuff, ups and downs, right?
Yes.
You were right there. So that's one thing. Secondly, so I know you're real. I just want everybody that's listening, I know y'all don't know Dr. Odom, we may not necessarily agree on all of the, geopolitical whatever. Right. Dr. Odom is, if you are in an issue, you talk about someone who knows grace, that's Dr. Odom. But also I appreciate you because you're exact, it's not sometimes what we say that's a testimony, it's just what we live. Yeah. Just your presence. And I've seen the way that you interact, and I've seen the way that you move, and that's because of your lived experience. That's you've done it. You've been there, So all of you that are watching, thank you for watching. Again, thank you to Dr. Odom. You can see him on LinkedIn, Dr. Oscar Odom. We'll make sure we drop the link in the bottom. You can catch me at darrellbennett.com and come back swinging. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate you all. Love you all. And as I close every broadcast off, I have to go here and say this. No matter what has happened in your life, no matter how it looks, no matter what people say, no matter what the statistics look like, no matter even if it's your family, if it's your parents, even if it's in the midnight hour, it is your own mind that's telling you. I want you to know, no matter what, you can come back. I'm a living witness. No matter what it was, you have to do the work. You got to transform. You got to do the work. You got to pivot. You got to do the work. You got to rebuild. But you can come back swinging.
Here we go.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Odom.
Thank you. Have a great